Hello friends, today I wanted to show you how I do some astrophotography processing with Photoshop. I want to turn the Heart Nebula from this raw image, this raw stacked image, to this processed image. And the way I'd like to do that is using some really basic techniques in Photoshop and kind of talk about some of the pros and cons with that versus other tools such as PixInsight. Let's get started. All right, here's a stacked image before we do any sort of processing in Photoshop. And you'll notice it's 32-bit because I can't see any histogram here. Before I want to switch it over to 16-bit and get all the tools, I'm going to just start stretching it out manually. All right, so Control L is one way to get to the levels. And then we're going to just start pulling in that histogram by stretching it out. And we'll kind of do it in small steps right here. Also pull up the black a little bit. And you're already starting to see a little bit of the clouds over there. So you'll notice that the RGB channels are not aligned. It looks like we've got a lot more green in this image. And part of that is because I have a dual band narrow filter on this. So to kind of correct for that, I'll just start pulling in the green separately. And I'll just get them equalized a little bit, and I'll just keep opening up the levels multiple times, pulling in that black level, pushing up the whole midtones. Okay, the levels look pretty good. Let's just take out a little bit more black. And now we can switch it over to 16-bit coloring. We don't want to use local adaptation. We'll just use exposure and gamma and have it at the defaults. And now on the right, you can see the histograms available. So now, as we maneuver this, we can kind of see how the whole thing move along. So I'll just kind of keep bringing that black level down. And as we get closer, we're starting to see more and more of this Heart Nebula. And I noticed that it's upside down. So let's fix that first, just for making it easier for us to know what's going on. So image rotation, 180 degrees. And there we go. We can just start to see the outline of the Heart Nebula with its core showing right there in the middle. So let's actually zoom in a bit so we can see what we got here. And actually, it looks pretty nice. We're starting to see some of the clouds. The stars are a bit bloated, but they're at least mostly circular, slight bit of oval. No big deal. Pretty good for a quick shot over an hour and a half. All right, let's keep moving these levels. Actually, I noticed the green is again still a bit high, so let's just pull it down. And now with the histogram on the right, we can actually see exactly where we're placing it. Okay, let's push up that midtones again and bring down the blacks. All right, we're getting pretty good. I don't want to remove too much information from the darks. So what we can do next is, that looks pretty good. All right, that should be enough for the stretch. Next, let's do the curves adjustment. And one of the things we could do here also is remove some of this background noise, but I actually noticed for this image, there's enough nebula almost everywhere that I don't want to remove too much of the background. We'll talk about that in a future video where I tried to do it with PixInsight too. So next I want to do some curves adjustments, so I'll just do Control M. And let's just see what we can get here. There we go. We're already starting to see some good information. We don't want to go too high or we'll start cutting off the brights and make the stars a bit too bloated. So we'll just keep that lower. And let's just remove some of that background, slight bit, that low darks. And that's starting to look a little better. Let's see, right around. Let's try that. Okay. So we're starting to see some of the nebula. It's looking pretty good actually. And we see some of the clouds over here. We've got some detail of the cutoff lower part of it. And we have a bit of green over here. And one thing we can do to remove that is just kind of reduce some of the green with the levels. And there, that should do it. A little bit more. Don't want to go too far. Right around there should be good. Okay. It's still a bit of a dark image, but we can work on that in Camera Raw. So Control-Shift-A lets us move over to Camera Raw because we still have a bit of a blue hue. We can kind of work on that with the temperature adjustment here. And let's have a look at the tint. I think right around, one thing we can actually try to do is see if we can remove the black level right there. And this actually removes a bit too much of the red, so we'll not do that. Okay, so we have here, all right, so we're in camera raw, and one of the first things I'd like to do is push up the exposure slightly. All right, so we've moved the exposure up, and let's have a look at some of the curve to see if we can reduce some of that darks. All right, right around there. We can leave the highlights alone. So we don't want to move too much of the black because it kind of causes a lot of the nebula to get lost. So right around there I think is a good mark. Similarly, we want to keep the clouds. So right around there, and this we can kind of leave alone. All right. Now if we zoom in, we can see that we still have some color noise. So we'll go over to the Detail tab and bump up that color noise reduction. And you can actually see the effect right away. Kind of smooths it all out. And we still have some grainy noise, which we can remove with noise reduction. We don't want to go too far or we lose some of the detail in the clouds. Also gives that a bit of a fake painted look. So we'll keep a little bit of the grain, and we want to keep as much of the detail as we can in the clouds over here, for example, and over here. So I'd say right around there looks decent. We still have some grain, but not too much. And already the image is looking up quite a bit more clear. The stars are still clear, and we can stay right there. I'd like to also push up some of the color. So let's see if we can increase the saturation a tiny bit and the vibration, the vibrance a tiny bit. Vibration, that was a bit of a slip. All right, we don't want to go too vibrant. So let's try just a touch of red more, right around there. There, that looks pretty pleasing. There, that looks pretty good. And I think, let's see if we can work with the tint slightly. Nope. I think right around there feels a little bit closer to natural. Okay. With that, we'll complete the changes and we can see the final result here. So you'll notice here we still have a tiny bit of gradient in the background. Here it's a bit brighter lower down versus higher up. We could try to remove some of that, but as a first pass, this isn't that bad. I'm pretty pleased with what we've got here, especially considering the conditions which we captured in. All right, this looks pretty good. Let's export and save this image and finish up. All right, and I choose high quality just because I'd rather keep as much detail as I can versus image size. All right, and there it is. Yay! I really like how this looks, and I think it's worth talking about the difference I had between this image, which I did with Photoshop, and one of my first attempts with PixInsight. A lot of it is also just my lack of understanding of using PixInsight properly, so I'll probably have a second go using both of them. So we can kind of go side by side. On the right we have the PixInsight one, and on the left we have the Photoshop. And to me at least, I think the Photoshop one is a lot more true to life and pleasing to the eye. I think I went a little bit too ham with the background subtraction, removing a lot of the nebula and the darker spots of the Heart Nebula, like right here versus right here. Even though it is less full of gas, it's not black. There's some cool, there's a lot of really nice information out there with the nebula. So I also think I went a bit too strong on the contrast for the clouds in PixInsight. And I think this is just a lack of understanding with the tools, but I want to show that you can actually get some really good results with Photoshop versus another tool if you just use the tool correctly. One thing I kind of like about the PixInsight one is it does show some of those stars closer to the nebula. You can see this little cloud of stellar gas being blown away from the star a lot clearer in the PixInsight one. versus the Photoshop, but it's still a bit too much. I think there's a happy medium between the two. Actually, one of the next steps I might do in a future video is do a bit of the processing in Photoshop and a bit of the processing in PixInsight and see where I can get some improvements. Another thing I like is just the fact that this Photoshop image, even though we've done very little post-processing in terms of removing the background, anything specific to like certain parts, we're still getting a very pleasing image that is technically more closer to what we actually see than say we would with an image like this, where we try to automatically or dynamically remove that background. Anyway, I think both of them have their merits, and I'm looking forward to having another go at this data with PixInsight in the future. Pardon me. I am pretty amazed at how much you can see out there in the night sky, even from a city. If you can get a camera and just take some long exposures, you'll start to see some really pretty things. And as you add a little bit of gear to, correct for the rotation of the Earth, to zoom in, to filter out some of that city versus focusing on the nebula, you can get some really amazing stuff, even from your backyard. In my case, I'm doing this from a balcony in an apartment. It's amazing what's possible. I'll probably try to get a wide angle for my camera and see if I can get some Milky Way shots. And I think that'll look really cool. And that's something kind of new for me also. If you have any tips or you have any questions about using Photoshop for astro and also for terrestrial photography, let me know. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Okay, let's start. All right, let's start here. All right, let's do this. All right, let's do this. I'm saying okay a lot. Okay, let's do this.